Hello there. We continue to see severe weather affecting parts of the US. Of course, last week Chris was looking at flooding that had been affecting parts of the Midwest in particular. So the northern parts of the plains off towards the Midwest, Iowa, Missouri, seeing quite a bit of flooding along the Mississippi and Missouri rivers as well. And so we continue to see that. Nebraska was badly affected by flooding back in March, of course. Many roads were washed away. Bridges are still yet to be repaired. Now, in the last few days, we've just seen this report from the United States Department of Agriculture. This is highlighting the main crops that are grown in the US and how things are looking so far this season in terms of their planting progress. The blue bar here, this is where you would normally expect that particular type of crop to be at this stage of the year on the 12th of May. So that's the 5-year average. The yellow colours here indicate where we are right now, and you can see all 5 of these crops are below average. So the weather really having a big impact on these crops. Most of these are being planted right now. The winter wheat, of course, that was planted many months ago. Right now, it's going through the heading season and will be cut in the coming weeks and months, of course. Now, while conditions haven't been ideal in the US, over in Russia, we have seen pretty good conditions weather-wise through the winter. And so provided the weather remains good through May and into June, then they should get a pretty good yield of winter wheat this coming season. Also affecting parts of the US, then all that rain, not necessarily a bad thing, because we have seen improved drought conditions. Over the last few years, this particular map, the Drought Monitor, has been showing a lot of the red in terms of the extreme and exceptional droughts across many parts of the US. But actually, in the last few weeks, 3 weeks ago, only 2.3% of the whole of the United States was considered in drought category or drought status, which is the lowest that you've ever seen with this particular product, which has been around for about 20 years or so. Right now, that's come back up to 2.5%, but it's still well down from where we have been in recent years. So the rain, not necessarily a bad thing, but of course, places are still quite waterlogged at the moment, and that's not going to improve in any great hurry at the moment. Right now, we've seen this big area of high pressure over the southeast of the US, so things have been relatively quiet for the last few days, but the jet stream started to wake up again, and as that comes in, it's going to interact with a lot of moisture being pulled northwards out of the Gulf of Mexico, the two combining then to give us several rounds of severe thunderstorms working their way across the plains and into the Midwest as well, where we really don't need any more rain right now. So several hazards over the next week to 10 days, potential for some tornadoes in places, large hail, which could damage some crops as well, and further rain on saturated ground will undoubtedly lead to further flooding issues as well. So something we're keeping a very close eye on over the next week or more. Now back home, things have been a little bit quieter, high pressure building in, which has meant much better conditions for spraying. Of course, we do need some rain, but equally with lighter winds, good conditions for spraying. So looking at the last 3 weeks, weekly chunks here for spraying, and by that we mean it's dry with the winds below 10 miles an hour. During late April and early May, both weeks we were looking at roughly 102, 103 hours of spraying opportunities in the UK averaged over the whole country. In the last week though, with the high pressure building in, that's jumped up to 131 hours. So pretty good conditions, and probably continuing in that vein for the next few days as well, because the weather isn't going to change in any great hurry. Looking at the jet stream, there's not a lot of jet stream activity over the UK. It's very weak. It's mainly to the south and west of us, which is keeping those Atlantic weather systems at bay. So with a very slack pressure pattern, there's not going to be a great deal of change over the next at least 7 days or so. Perhaps something a bit more significant changing beyond that. So looking at it in a bit more detail, low pressure over the nearby continent. And as I run this animation through, you can see how it extends a little bit more across the UK. So there will be an increasing risk of some afternoon and evening showers developing. Most of the mornings will be dry for the next few days, but there'll be a few isolated showers developing inland, but very hit and miss. Not everywhere seeing these by any means. This ridge out west will keep the Atlantic weather fronts from coming in. And if anything, this ridge may start to extend a bit more across the UK as we head through towards the latter part of next week, just temporarily settling things down and killing off those showers as well. Now, if you want to stay dry and you want to go out spraying, a great way to do that is to log on to WQRadar. You can sign up, there's a free trial available, and you can see exactly where the showers are and where they're heading to see if they're coming towards you. But on this, you can also see weather observations, whether the winds are light enough to go spraying, whether it's not too hot to go spraying as well. And if you wanted to, you can also see archived data looking back at past weather events. And there's also an additional feature where you can subscribe to lightning, email or text alerts, which will let you know if there's any thunderstorms heading in your direction. Now, over the next 10 days or so across the UK, as I say, there's not a great deal of rain, just isolated showers. So as this graph shows here, each line on here is a different computer model. We run this 50 times. The starting conditions are tweaked ever so slightly just to see the spread of possible outcomes as we go through into the future. This is what we call ensemble forecasting. Now you can see they're all very tightly clustered at the beginning of this forecast. So this is through this coming weekend, Saturday into Sunday. Not a great deal of rain showing. This shows the rainfall and evaporation. So if it's wet, you'd expect the lines to go above zero. And if it's dry with the evaporation, of course the sun is very strong at this time of the year, you would expect the soil moisture to come below zero with a rainfall or water deficit in the surface layers. Now for the next few days it's holding at around zero because individual showers, isolated showers, may give you a little bit of moisture for the ground, but again some places won't see them at all. And then as we head through towards the second half of next week, notice the spread getting very large. Now we showed you this plot in last week's video where they're all very clustered on a downward trajectory. On this week's one, notice the spread is much larger as you go out in time, and there's quite a few of them going above zero. So that just suggests there's quite a bit of uncertainty from sort of mid to late next week onwards. But the average, this red line here, still keeps it below zero, down to 10 millimeters lower than we are right now in terms of surface moisture. So there's still a trend there for things to continue to dry out, despite the fact there may be the odd shower around. But just bear in mind there could be an opportunity for some more rain coming back in again towards late May, but a lot of uncertainty at this stage. We'll keep you posted. So averaged out over the next 7 days, this is how the pressure pattern looks. Lower than normal pressure. We showed you that low pressure over the nearby continent. That's denoted by the blues here. Higher pressure generally across northern Europe and down towards the west of Britain as well. So what that means is more of a easterly flow coming in from the nearby continent at times. Low pressure nearby, meaning the risk of some showers, but it's not exceptionally low. There's no deep lows, no strong winds or anything like that coming up in the next 7 days. Then as we head through towards late May, that low pressure is still there. It shifts a little bit further east, which may allow this higher pressure to try and nudge in, which could temporarily kill off some of those showers. Not a great deal of frost risk to be had through this spell either. It's going to be quite humid air, quite stagnant, with mainly light winds, as I say, good spraying conditions. And as we head through towards late May and early June, it looks like high pressure will try to build up from the Azores into southern Britain. So that will tend to make things a bit drier here, whereas low pressure towards the northwest means more of a westerly Atlantic flow. So there is this potential late May into early June for a spell of Atlantic-driven weather with some rain, maybe some stronger winds, particularly across the northern half of the UK. The further south you come, those fronts may be somewhat weaker and hence not a great deal of rain from that. And then things tend to reverse, I think, towards the middle of June with the higher pressure becoming more confined to the north of the UK and lower pressure, a very weak signal at the moment, towards the south, which would suggest that the southern areas are more likely to see a little bit of rain or showers during the early stages of June, whereas the further north you go, it should be somewhat drier. And throughout most of the 4 weeks, temperatures will be near or even slightly above average. So no sign of any particularly cold weather, no sign of any exceptionally wet weather either, but a little bit of rain here and there over the next 4 weeks. So to summarise that, then over the next few days, a few showers, but much of the time it will be dry. The showers will be pretty isolated, so you could avoid them and stay dry entirely. Then towards the very end of May into the very beginning of June, it may turn a bit more unsettled across the UK, generally speaking. And as we head through into the early part of June, drier in southern areas as that high pressure builds in, but wetter conditions probably across parts of Scotland and northern Britain in general. And then towards mid-June, it turns a little bit more changeable, a few showers around, the odd bit of rain, but equally some lengthy dry and bright spells around as well. So that's how things are looking over the next 4 weeks or so. As ever, we'd love to hear your feedback. You can send it to us via info@weatherquest.co.uk. Use the hashtag WQFarmingForecast on Twitter, or of course, if you're watching on YouTube, give us a comment down below and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.